Доброго вечора середи. Вітаємо вас на запису 105-го епізоду подкасту з інформаційної безпеки Security Sutin. Ми разів зі 5 намагалися його записати, нарешті записали, коли в нас з'явився гість. Гість, правда, десь іде разом з Льошею Старовим, десь вони на підході. І доки вони йдуть, я вам нагадаю, що 26 жовтня в Українському домі відбудеться 14-та конференція з інформаційної безпеки Security Sutin. Вона обіцяє бути...
USCon.
Вона обіцяє бути несподіваною, але може сподіваною, трохи незвичною. Дуже мені подобається наше веню, як там всередині. Ми сьогодні там чергово були, все передумали. Все як завжди. Ось Льоша до нас прийшов. У нас, напевно, коли вийде це відео, у нас вже не буде закритий CFP, але вдруг ви ще встигнете податися. Квитки у нас на сайті, вони ще є. Після того, як Early Bird закінчилися, вони трошки подорожчали, але ви ще маєте змогу їх купити за більш-менш прийнятну ціну, тому що в останні 2 дні продажів вони будуть ще дорожчі. 27-28 жовтня у нас буде B-Sides Київ Autumn. Це буде в форматі хакерської вечірки на 24 години. У нас будуть доповіді, перші вже анонси пішли, а інші мені чомусь не дають інформацію про себе. У нас будуть активності різного виду, у нас буде багато пива, їжі, їжі може не так багато, але буде, і всякі прикольності, над якими ми зараз працюємо і дуже хочемо вас вразити. Ось. Що ще я знаю з того, що буде?
Пива, вина і самогону.
29-го, здається. Де там у нас вересень. 29 вересня буде ОВАСП Київ в чергове. І з найближчого такого великого це, здається, все. Більш-менш великого, тому що ОВАСП зазвичай там на 100-110 людей. And we have our guest, Alexander. Losha, please tell some words about him and what we will discuss today.
Alexandr, core developer в network team Tora.
А как его фамилия правильно читается?
Я читаю Фарой, да. Я не уверен, я думаю, лучше спросить его. Попросим представиться. Да, в общем, идея была в том, что мы связались с ребятами из Тора, хотели выпустить эпизод про Тор. Александр должен к нам присоединиться и рассказать много интересного, потому что, в принципе, за последнее время в Tor Network очень много различной разработки, различных инноваций, много интересного. Так что, надеюсь, у нас это сегодня получится.
I hope.
Hey.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you guys loud and clear.
Cool. Yeah.
At least.
Sorry for that.
It's good news.
No problem. Actually, I also had technical difficulties with my handset.
Alexander, Alexei told that you work in Tor Project, and you have a lot of interesting information about it. And can you tell some words about yourself and what do you do in Tor and why Tor?
Yes, sure, I can start out with that. So my name is Alex, I live in Denmark. I've been working for Tor since 2017, in the beginning of the year. And I work on this team we call the network team. So Tor is split up into different teams that work on different engineering tasks. And the network team is responsible for sort of everything that has to do with the network, everything that touches the network wire of sort of the anonymity network. And that includes like the Tor network itself, the Tor core daemon, which is what interfaces with the network, and also development of features like onion services and performance enhancements and so on like that.
Cool. I guess we should probably start with some a bit more background, because we have some student listeners, and in general, can you tell us what is Tor and how it works?
Yes, for sure. So Tor is an anonymity network that works that allows you to be anonymous on the internet. and give you different security properties that you don't have when you're browsing sort of the normal network. So we make two products. One of them is sort of the end user product, which most people is what most people are sort of interfacing with. It's called the Tor browser. You go to our website, torproject.org, and download this browser that we call Tor browser, which ships with the Tor network daemon in. Then what you do is that you browse the web like you normally would do, but behind the scenes what Tor is doing is that when you make a connection to, say, for example, facebook.com or whatever website you're browsing, it makes a connection into the Tor network where you go through 3 nodes in the network so the first one is sort of called the guard node. You connect to that directly. The guard node will know the IP you're connecting from. And then via the guard node, you connect to a middle node, and then from the middle node, you connect to an exit node. And from the exit node, you connect to the website you're trying to browse. So the idea is here that for each hop you sort of take down the lane, the next hop will only know about your previous hop, but it will never know where you originally come from. And thus the website will only see the IP address of the exit node, the last node in the circuit.
Cool. What is actually the current size of the Tor network?
So right now, the network itself is run by volunteers. We have quite a lot of community around that. The network is currently around 6,500 nodes, and there's around 100 gigabits running through it per second in average, and it has capacity to around the double of that. The relays are run by volunteers in either individuals or larger organizations that goes together and sort of form an umbrella organization where they take donations to get funding to host these relay nodes that everyone can set up. So it's a pretty big network, and I just checked our stats. We have 140 relays in Ukraine right now, so that's pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah, I guess from end users, I guess many people in Ukraine especially start to be concerned about censorship and actually anonymity online. But I guess we had this old assumption that Tor and Tor browser is actually much slower than when you access from normal browser. Do you have were there recent improvements in terms of performance, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely something I've felt as well over the years as I've been using Tor. One of the big things we've been doing recently is we've had a lot of focus in the organization to be mobile. We were a bit slow to sort of join that race. Everyone else has sort of moved over to being on doing a lot of the things we used to do with our computers are now being done on our mobile phones. And we were a bit behind on that, and we're sort of trying to catch up there. But one of the big things there has been to look at the performance and network performance in general. And it has gotten a lot better over the last couple of years. To the point today where sometimes I'm using Tor browser where I was actually planning on using my normal browser and I don't notice it until pretty late. So I think the performance has drastically gotten a lot better recently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you also actually touched the mobile, I guess, right? I also heard that during recent years, Tor was developing something for Android, right?
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, do you have
sorry.
some use there?
Can you repeat the question?
I remember that you were looking for Android developers, right? And you were trying to port, I believe, Tor browser to Android platform.
Yes. We found someone there, and they have been hired. We recently announced, you can actually go to the Play Store now on Google Play, if you're an Android user, and download the alpha version of Tor browser. It was just released last week, so we're already very far there. It's looking really good. I've started using it on my phone this week, and it works really, really well.
Awesome. That's nice news. Okay, yeah, I have many more questions, but we probably skipped a little bit background about you. So if you want a bit more to share, how your story, how you joined Tor network.
Oh, sure. So I've been pretty interested in sort of anonymity systems and cryptography in general over the last many years. I've been in the open source community since I was since high school. And I was very interested in this programming language called Erlang. which is like a functional programming language that's used a lot in the telco industry. And I wanted to sort of understand Tor from a slightly more low-level perspective, how things worked. I've seen all these graphs and sort of heard the explanation I did here before with how you have like multiple hubs and so on, but I wanted to sort of feel how it actually worked. And a really good way to figure out how things work is to try to build them yourself. So I started writing an implementation of Tor in Erlang. And sort of tried to get the pieces together and get it to work, see how you could test it, and sort of got a pretty good understanding of how Tor worked. And then a friend of mine who was with the Tor project reached out to me and said they had an opening for a position for the network team, and I should try to apply for that. And I applied for it and went through the interview process and so on, and ended up joining the network team, where I'm now working like mostly with the C implementation of the sort of the official client.
That's tough stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we should point more on technical side. There is our solutions for anonymous web use and bypassing some firewalls and so on in countries such as China could you do some comparison between Tor and other solutions such as I2P, VPNs, and so on?
Sure. I think there are many questions there. I can start out with the first thing, which is sort of the anti-censorship part of it. Tor has this pretty cool system built into it called pluggable transports, which like VPN providers are also starting to adopt. It's a way where you can connect to the Tor network using a different transport protocol than the Tor protocol itself. So the Tor protocol itself is like this wire protocol where we send some binary packets back and forward, and it's wrapped in a TLS connection. But in some places, it might be they do weird things to TLS connections, or they disallow them for like do different pattern matching, like on the edges of their network, and sort of that way filter out Tor users. So what pluggable transports can do is that you can, for example, make it look like you're having a Skype conversation. So it tries to mimic sort of the patterns that you see when people are having a voice conversation on Skype. It speaks over the same ports. And it could also look like ordinary HTTP traffic, where it just looks like, if you're trying to introspect what the user is doing, it just looks like they're doing clear text HTTP connections where they're downloading a lot of weird objects, but it could potentially be real objects. But in reality, we're disguising Tor traffic in it. So that's one of the big things we have, both for researchers and for people who are in these places, where they can sort of try out some of these technologies. One of the really big ones have been this domain fronting. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, where you sort of connect, where you use the infrastructure of certain very big content delivery networks and cloud providers to sort of say that you are making a connection to Google, and then when you've made the connection to Google, you say that you actually want to connect to this service in the Google Cloud, which then happens to be a Tor relay. And there are many things running on these cloud providers, so many of them are like whitelisted as being positive and goes through these networks. So the other part of the question that you asked was if I could compare Tor to sort of I2P and VPNs. I don't know that much about I2P, so I'm going to stay with sort of VPNs. Tor is a decentralized system, whereas VPNs are often referred to as a centralized system. And VPNs, I think I can understand why certain people are using VPNs, sort of from a performance perspective, for the same question that was asked before with the historical sort of performance of Tor browsers, of Tor in general. But a VPN has the problem that you put a large amount of trust into the service operator of the VPN. So if they at some point are going to sort of tell who their users are, then you're in trouble. Whereas with Tor, we try to design the system so that we can never know who the user is. And I think that's a pretty important sort of difference in these two systems. And I think if you could try to compare I2P to a VPN, they would probably say the same thing.
Awesome. Like about like the current state of availability of Tor from different countries, like what can you say? Like, because like in different countries recently, like we have spike of censorship, and governments try to shut down Tor, try to identify the network and so on. What do you think? Like, for example, if I really go to some like censorship country, can I use Tor there?
So it's an interesting question, because this is one of those weird races that will always be, where it might be one day it works and the next days it stops working because they have taken a step further, like the people who are doing the censorship is taking a step further to try to reduce the amount of Tor connectivity that's going out. And then the day after, we might have found some kind of solution where we can come through these circumventions they're doing. So it's difficult to say. I think the general state of it is pretty good. It's something we're going to focus a lot more on here in the upcoming year, where we're going to look more into sort of anti-censorship technology, and have some people who are focusing on this sort of race that will always exist, and it will continue to exist forever, because it's definitely two people, or like two groups that are sort of against each other and trying to get this to work or not work.
I guess we can, I can switch back a little bit to usability, in the sense that, like, again, like recent news that we see, right, that, for example, Brave browser now has like tabs that open connections to Tor network, right? Yeah. And I've heard about also this Project Fusion, if I'm not mistaken, with Firefox, that basically states that Firefox wants, right, to become like major, like this anonymity browser, like based on Tor browser, so you can like focus on research. So like, can you just like comment a little bit about this direction?
Sure. I think like the first thing about Brave, I think it's great they're trying to integrate it. They have some really, really good engineers working on this. I haven't really followed it much. I think Brave is sort of an interesting concept in general. The thing they're trying to solve, not just with Tor. For the Mozilla part of it, we have and have had for a very long time a very, very strong partnership with Mozilla. We have sort of a little overlap about we come to each other's meetings and stuff like that. And so the thing we're really, really good at in Tor is sort of these anti-fingerprinting technologies, trying to figure out which kind of web technologies that, because the web is constantly changing. Now we're sitting and talking over this communication which happens in a browser that wouldn't have been possible 20 years ago. And these things are sort of changing constantly. And some of these technologies that are going into the web browsers have pretty bad, it's bad from a fingerprinting perspective. And so what Mozilla is doing is that we currently maintain sort of these branches of Firefox where we have all our anti-fingerprinting patches on top of. And Mozilla is trying to take some of these and apply it to normal Firefox, so that normal Firefox users will benefit from these changes that we have done to Tor browser over the years. And of course, over the time, as they take more and more of these patches that fits them, the more time the Tor browser team will have to look at sort of new technologies and figure out sort of the fingerprinting properties that might exist on some of these web technologies.
Yeah, it sounds like a very cool cooperation, right? Nice.
Yeah, it's a wonderful cooperation we have with those guys. They are doing, like, first of all, everything that Mozilla is standing for is generally very nice, sort of for the open web. And I think a lot of things they're doing are pretty great.
Yeah, like speaking about that, you mentioned also like domain fronting, but I believe like recently, like big like cloud providers and other entities, they try to shut down this practice, right? Because they're afraid of all these problems with anti-censorship and censorship and so on.
Yeah, I don't really know what it is they're so concerned about, but yes, there's definitely been a push away from it. It has been very effective for the time it has worked. It's a pretty expensive thing to operate in general, but that can be handled with sort of donations. But yeah, unfortunately, they have started sort of doing a push against it. And I know there are people internally in all of these companies who are trying to push for it, but I'm not really sure what the state of that is, or whether the companies are just going to go back off and say, like, no, we're not going to allow this anymore. I think it's sad because it was very effective.
Yeah, But I guess again, like many like censorship events recently going on, and everybody just afraid and like to have problems with governments, and can you actually give us some, like, our listeners, some advice about how to properly actually use Tor? Whether you need to use Tor browser, whether it's better to use like just Tor network, I don't know, Tor network and VPN and Tor, and so on.
That's a good question. In general, my advice to people is to use like Tor browser. Use the normal Tor browser. If you're like a normal person who is sort of like self-identifies as like a normal person who knows a little bit about computers, you know how you should like download a new browser and use that. I definitely recommend you to use just the Tor browser bundle that we sort of ship. I don't really have a use case where I need to compose Tor together with a VPN, but if there was a case where you somehow could come out, if you're in a censored area where you could come out with a VPN and you could go through with Tor via that, then that might be beneficial to you here and now. But like understanding the big differences between it that the provider of the VPN might turn against you, I think is a pretty important thing to have in mind when you sort of start composing these things. There's also some interesting projects sort of in the community. There's I don't know if you guys have heard of Hunix and like Cubes, and they have these things where they sort of split Tor and the browser into two components again, where Tor browser bundle is the two components sort of fused together, and then run it in different virtual machines, and then you have sort of an isolated network there. And it has some different security properties that you don't see when you just have Tor browser, but it's also harder to use, of course. So if you are that only makes sense if you're sort of already a very good Linux user and you're into cubes and all that kind of stuff. So that requires a bit more technical knowledge to be using that.
Cool. Okay. Okay. I have more technical questions, guys. Do you have another ones before I resume?
Feel free.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. I have like several probably like sorrowful questions from different aspects of Tor, but yeah, just like some interesting questions.
Cool.
So I've thought about like you remember like these correlation attacks?
Yeah.
So I believe like you should for sure know that about like different correlation attacks from the level of autonomous systems, right?
Yeah.
And I remember that was like actually famous research. I participated in one research about that. Like we tried to develop a Storia client that actually helps to protect, to create proper circuits, basically. Yeah. So like, what is the current state actually of like protection in Tor network against correlation attacks?
So one of the things that is being worked on a lot right now is like some new padding schemes, where you have sort of between the different nodes that I was explaining at first, where you have your different hubs that you're going through, that while you're sending your traffic, you will also sometimes send some traffic which is like bogus. There's no content in it. You're just sending it inside the sort of encrypted frame and saying like, okay, send these 512 bytes on the wire. They don't do anything except adding more sort of network load. And there's like one of the developers we have on the network team has focused a lot on that recently to sort of figure out when it makes sense to send these frames on, like both on connections where you do like, if you're downloading a big file, you might have a connection running for a minute where you have a high amount of throughput, or it might be you're just sitting and chit-chatting on an instant messaging service where you have very low amount of things touching the network. When does it make sense here to put these padding frames? And it's pretty interesting research, and it's again one of those things where the Tor community is really, really great because we've spanned also over to a large amount of researchers who are really into trying to find new issues that are with Tor's way to, and also come up with solutions to how we can fix them, and then we get it implemented. And this is a product of that as well. A large amount of these sort of defenses are a product of that community.
So basically, like padding frames is the current strategies that you choose, right?
There are some. I'm not super familiar with that, how the actual are implemented, but there certainly is, yeah.
Okay. And like just to complete, like another kind of attacks is basically attacks on relays, right? Malicious relays in the Tor network, like
Yeah, so one of the big problems is, of course, if the 3 nodes that you pick, the nodes are not picked randomly, they are picked out of like different heuristics, and like that makes the choice of which algorithm which node you pick. And the first node is static for a longer time than the 2 other nodes, and so on. And of course, the really bad one is if you get like if your guard node is owned by the same one who runs the exit node you're connected to, because they will be able to learn some more information about it. So one of the things that we also have, we have like a bad relays team, which is constantly trying to figure out what's going on with the Tor network. If there's people trying to do Sybil attacks, which is these attacks where you try to run a large amount of Tor relays where they are owned by the same sort of organization behind it, where, for example, they start 1,000 new relays, and then they hope you end up using multiple of the same owned relays here. And then they do different kinds of bad things there. And the team who's trying to discover this are really, really good at like finding things and getting them sort of blacklisted from the network. I think I see daily that they're removing nodes from the network.
Yeah, like just like a side question here is what would you advise, for example, if I want to run Tor Relay, right? If I want to be a volunteer and like extend network, is it easy? Is it hard? Like, and what should I do?
I think a really good thing to do is at many of the places that we go to where we have events or where there's like Tor volunteers, they usually have these meetings called Tor Relay Operators meetings. And they're really good in that they are very focused on what's going on in the local community or in the local country. So, for example, running a Tor relay for me in Denmark is very different from someone running it in the US or someone running it in Asia or other places in the world, because there's different sort of legislation around it. So we usually say to people they should definitely go together and figure with some other people who are interested in this and sort of figure out, is there other relay operators in my country that I can talk to and hear what their experiences is with it? Generally running the, you can have 2 different kinds of relays that you can run. And you can decide, like you can run it from everywhere. You can run it from anywhere where you have a static IP, basically. So one is that you run these middle nodes or the guard nodes. They're the 2 first ones. They are sort of always inside the network. There's never any traffic going to any servers other than other Tor nodes from these 2 types of relays. And then there is the exit node where there is traffic going out to other websites. And of course, some of this traffic might contain someone sending a spam mail or downloading some copyrighted content or whatever that could trigger some kind of automatic abuse system. And that's why we usually recommend people, if they want to, for example, run a relay at home, they should not run an exit node at home unless they're like a lawyer or have some very good understanding of what the consequences of doing that is. And then we have like this practice, I think it has started sort of in Europe, but where you go together as sort of and form like an umbrella organization where you take the donations. I talked a little bit about it earlier, where you take donations from members or people who just in general think it would be cool to help out with like running nodes in the Tor network, but don't sort of want to run it themselves. They don't have like a spare Linux machine in a data center or at home or whatever. And then they instead just donate to these organizations, and the organization then has some volunteers who are operating these servers. Depending on how much donation that comes in, they can like expand and like get more servers and get more capacity and so on. And I think there's 2 different angles to it, right? Because we want to have a lot of diverse people who are running it to sort of spread the trust out in many people. But also having these organizations are really good because they can really easily go together a large amount of people and run some really, really big relays. And that makes the network, of course, a lot faster. So I think the biggest point is to go together in like your local community and figure out how it is in the location you're in and what makes the most sense. And you can run a relay on very limited hardware today still. On like I've run one at home from my ISP here where I live. And I've also had some running in different data centers around the world, and both of them works pretty well.
Do you have like cases when like university lab, for example, runs Tor relays or?
Yes, definitely. It used to be a big focus for us, where a lot of where we try to like approach universities to operate Tor relays. I'm not really sure what the status is about it today, except that I sometimes see that some of the members of sort of the academic Tor community say that they have they're operating Tor relays in their lab, and I know there are people who's in the Tor community who are operating Tor relays in university labs. So that used to be a very, very big thing, but I think there's still a large amount of nodes there, but it's not something we're focusing particularly much on right now, where we reach out specifically to universities, as far as I know.
Yeah, speaking about actually research and universities, right? You've told that basically Tor actually takes a lot from like these research communities. And like, for example, one conference that I have in mind is like PETS, Privacy Enhancing Technologies. And I know like there are many Tor papers there and many Tor people, I believe, support this conference, right?
Yes.
Yeah, do you have like other examples? So you can comment a little bit about like PETS or...
I think PETS is one of the really big ones. I was myself very sad that I didn't go this year. I've never been to PETS, but it was a boring week to be at work that week because everyone else was there. So that says a little bit about it. It's a very popular conference in this community, and it spans pretty widely. There's also like talks about mixnets and cryptography. There's sort of the entire spectrum there, and it's a good place to meet people from sort of the very broad anonymity community who are interested in that. And one of the cool things they've started having, like, I think it's a recent thing, they have this thing called hot pets too, where it's not like super focused on the tough academic questions, but also sort of some more real world applications of sort of the research here. And I think that's a great step to have as well too. So I hope I can go to PETS next year and not miss it.
Yeah, I've been like once, like this year, like I believe a couple of last years I haven't been there, but like I've been in 2016, I believe. It was very cool conference here in Germany. Once I remember one track was actually about post-quantum era and Tor, basically how to improve encryption and so on.
We have some pretty interesting specifications, like everything we do before we start writing the code, we write these specifications, which is like, RFCs from the IETF world. We just have sort of our own, which is a little bit easier to write than the RFCs. And we have some interesting specifications there to make Tor this thing called post-quantum safe, which is, it comes from this sort of question that I think arose a couple of years ago, where will we be able to build a quantum computer within the next 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 years? And one of the big problems there is, of course, if the answer to that question is yes, let's say there is some adversary somewhere out there who's recording everything we do on the internet right now. And they save everything, including the TLS handshakes. Then once there is this quantum computer somewhere, then they could potentially, or if it works like the way we expect it to work, they will be able to break these TLS handshakes and suddenly decode the encrypted traffic that we once thought was safe and once considered safe, but then suddenly they're able to decode it like 30 years later. And that, of course, will have a very big impact on Tor if there is someone out there who will be able to go back and decode encrypted Tor traffic. So we, of course, want to be out as quick as possible with this sort of protection against this. So all these ciphers that exist for this, Google did an interesting experiment with it. I think maybe it was in 2016 or maybe it was in 15, where they enabled like an extension to TLS on their Chromium or the Chrome product and some of their servers, where they tried to do like these post-quantum handshakes. I don't know why they stopped doing it. I think it might have been to sort of measure some latency on how much slower the handshakes become. But it was around that time, I think, we also started being interested in that. I know we're working on right now some parts of Tor that is needed to be fixed before we can start doing these very big handshakes. The post-quantum handshake usually have a lot more bytes on the wire than the elliptic curve, Diffie-Hellman, and the more old-school classical crypto systems.
Yeah, I've also heard that you are planning to increase the length of Onion websites, right?
Oh yes, the URL
is related, right? Is it like already there, or?
It is. It's pretty cool. It's we used to call them hidden services, and now we sort of call them onion services. We had the version 2, which was the old system, and now we recently got v3 out, which is where I think the URLs are 56 characters now. But it has a lot of potential. It's a very interesting system, and I think onion services might be one of the most interesting technologies in Tor if you sort of zoom out for a bit, because they have completely different security properties than we're used to from the normal net. Because you actually have the anonymity aspect of it, but you also have sort of authentication to the address that you are connecting to directly, right?
Yeah. Here I have a question from usability of this, like 50 symbols, right?
I think it's
if
pretty
you make
important.
a mistake, yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a long thing to remember, and I think many people are. I myself, it's an anecdote for myself, of course. I'm very bad at using bookmarks, but with onion services, I suddenly have a very big use case for having bookmarks in my browser. But I think with onion services, it's pretty important to think of the onion service as an IP address. Like, it's the IP address of the Tor network in reality. If we were browsing the web, let's say we were all browsing it using IPv6, and we all had to remember these 128-bit addresses every time we had to go to a website, that of course would also be a problem. And then we invented DNS, or DNS was there before IPv6, but then we made this abstraction on top of it where we could find it. One of the big research questions that haven't been solved yet, I would say, for Tor is to build sort of a DNS system where the resources you're looking up is onion addresses. And that is something we would really like to see. And there's some interesting proposals in the Tor system where we want to build into Tor sort of a mechanism like the pluggable transports, but for doing DNS to onions, where people will be able to experiment with different plugins that you could put in, which would then enable you to do lookups with ordinary or more normal-looking names, which will then in the background refer to onion addresses. But it's not something we have the answer to yet. So that is why we sort of want to make the extension so that other people can play around with it, and then it might be there is some really, really good ideas out there for how to do it that fits with sort of the ideas behind Tor, in that we want to be a decentralized system and not have trust put on single authorities and so on.
Yeah, that's very cool. I guess for our listeners, it's good to find out that there is lots of research happening, lots of different improvement directions, right? Yes. That they can try to investigate, try to join the community.
Yes.
Yeah, I guess in terms of if anybody wants to join Tor team, is it hard? Do you have some special knowledge that you're interested in? You need special interviews that you do?
So the community, I think, is incredibly open, and we use IRC, the very old school chat system, where we have our communication channels on the OFTC network. We have a large amount of different things we're doing. We have the technical sides of things where we are doing development. We have a community team which is doing pretty amazing stuff with reaching out to people in different countries where we think there might not be any sort of good presence, knowledge about Tor, where we try to teach it. We have our UX team, which is also a reasonably new thing, which has really changed a lot in Tor, because they're so focused on the user here and what the user can expect from things. If you try to download Tor browser today and compare it to Tor browser 2 years ago, you will see that it's a lot more friendly in sort of the way it both writes to the user and the way it sort of guides you through the initial setup and so on. And all of this is thanks to the UX team. So there are many different, and then we of course have the browser team, which is like working on the Tor browser part. So there are good opportunities to be a part of the community. It's always a bit, it's of course always a bit scared when you have this thing you think is nice, and it's a good thing to like join in and see and observe how the community is, and then try to find some spot where you think you can chip in. It might be that you're a really good programmer, then you can join in on some of the technical sides of things. It might be you're really good at like doing community work in your local area, for example in Ukraine, then you can join in there and do reach out work there and so on. So there are many different opportunities to sort of get involved. And I think the best way is to like get on our mailing lists, get a feeling of what's going on, get on our IRC chat and see what's going on there. And if you have the possibility, like go to events like PETS and like FOSDEM and other events where there's we just had a large booth at Hope in the US where there was a lot of Tor people, and generally just chat with people about it. I think that's a good way to get introduced. I think it's a very friendly community, which I think is a very big positive thing.
I agree, yeah. It's good. Yeah, by the way, again, like we have a conference in Ukraine, right, in October, USGCon, so you're invited, you're welcome.
Oh, cool. I have a ton of traveling coming up, so I'm not really sure how my schedule looks right now. But I was looking at it, it looks really nice. I saw you also had the call for papers and everything out.
Yeah, so yeah, it's like community drive-in, so we're
awesome.
very also interested in anonymity and censorship, again, because recently in Ukraine there were lots of law proposals and regulation proposals that try to enforce actually censorship. That we are not happy with, unfortunately. So maybe you will see lots of spikes in terms of Tor network from Ukraine.
In Tor network users, yeah. It's always a bit with like, of course we are happy that people are able to use it, but it's not good when there's like large spikes, of course, because that means usually there's something bad going on somewhere, right?
Exactly. I remember actually I've talked to Roger at DEF CON last year, and he told even like stories. So basically in Ukraine, basically I guess 2 years ago, right, already. So we have several big Russian services blocked. And basically at that time they saw like this spike in Tor network from different like locations in Ukraine, basically. And the problem was that all these Russian services like Yandex browser and so on, they tried like to ship versions that have VPN inside, and sometimes they used actually Tor connection. Basically,
I think I remember that.
Yeah, I believe like if you have some more detail about that, but yeah, that was a really funny story.
I remember it. There was some problem there where they bundled it, but I'm not really sure what happened, and I don't really know also why it stopped, if it actually stopped. But I remember Roger talking about that.
Yeah, that was, for us it's a bit funny case because like after all this censorship, we will start to install all these like shady applications that it's like VPN, whatever. And just like, come on, you give your data to some shady VPN provider. So here I have a probably question about usability a bit. So there are lots of like secure messaging applications now, and lots of applications try to claim that they're the most secure and so on. Like we have Telegram in Russia, right? We have Viber, if you heard, that's very popular in Ukraine actually, and now also try to claim that they provide security end-to-end. So do you have like a nice use case how to use Tor for like secure messaging? Is there like some special application, or like you just need to visit like, I don't know, to chat on forum on hidden services or something like that?
So that's once again one of those things where there is a lot of research projects. I don't remember its name, but I can refer to sort of a thing that is a bit similar to it, which is called Ricochet, which is it's designed around that you have an identifier, which again it's like the onion URL. So it's like this pretty long, weird-looking set of characters. But what it does then is that it creates a hidden service that your friends, like they run the Ricochet client as well, and then it will automatically connect to the hidden service you expose, and you will communicate over this. So all the communication you're doing is happening inside the Tor network, and it doesn't rely on any servers in these centralized servers. If you look at sort of the architecture around like Wire and Signal and Telegram, I'm not too sure about Telegram, but at least Signal, you have the end-to-end encryption, but you still have sort of the metadata in that you connect to whatever server hosting platform Signal is on, and then you store your message until your friend is downloading their message. And that, of course, leaks some information about where you are if you're not doing this over Tor, which I'm not doing that with Signal, at least. But I think from a sort of an engineering point of view, I think Ricochet in this part is pretty interesting because of the sort of architecture in that it doesn't require any centralized servers. You just install it. You add your friends, which of course is these weird characters. That's again, if we solve the domain name problem there, we are going to solve this issue as well.
Right.
And there is a newer version of it, which I think is more maintained, and it also supports the new Onion services, not just the old one. I forgot its name, but I just saw it like before I went on vacation. I saw it. It came out as a paper and an implementation. Very important.
Yeah, awesome. Guys, do you have questions?
Oh, I have some small question. Alexander, if we talk about censorship situation with some blocked Russian servers and so on, how do you think is Tor more frequently used by bright side? It means some activist censorship avoiding and so on, or by dark side, some kinds of criminals, over bad guys?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So first, like the first part of it is, of course, we can never know who uses it. We have some idea about it. But I think Tor and the internet itself is sort of a reflection on society. We know in society that there are people who are doing bad things. It's fortunately a pretty low percentage. And I do believe that the Tor network will reflect that in the same way that the rest of society does, in that there's probably a certain percent of the Tor traffic that is terrible stuff. But I think the vast majority of it is normal people browsing normal stuff online who just don't want to be like monitored for everything they do on the internet. And there's some percent of that are activists. Some of them are journalists. Some of them are like just normal people sitting at home wanting to see YouTube in some special country or whatever. And there will also be some terrible people like criminals and stuff like that who are using it, of course. But I think the composition is very much the same as the rest of the internet.
Yeah, here there is like also this research direction, if I'm not mistaken, right, that different websites use different, like anti-bot solutions or whatever, that sometimes also like blacklist Tor IP addresses and basically just block Tor connection. So if some user wants to access it from censored country, right, and the website doesn't want to be accessed by Tor users, like there is a problem. Do you have like some kind of work in that direction?
Yeah, so like there is this content delivery network called Cloudflare, which operates like it's sort of it's a free product that you can put in front of your website if you get a large amount of DOS attacks or distributed DOS attacks. And they will sort of take some of the harm so that your server is not the one getting hit, but their very big network is getting hit. And they've made some, like historically, they've had this system that if you're a Tor user, then you will see a large amount of like these captchas you have to solve where you have to mark some images, whether it's street signs or roads or whatever. And they've changed the system, like I think last year, where now in their sort of admin console, if you're a website owner, Tor is now like a country. So if you go to a website where you see these Cloudflare things often, which was one of the big things we heard a lot about some years ago, and to some extent still do, then you are then you might be able to write to the website admin and say, hey, could you whitelist Tor users? Because many of them have just enabled this protection before this happened, and then they're sort of unaware that there's a certain percent of their potential users that they are leading out on it. If you write that you're just an ordinary person, that you cannot access it via the web browser you use, and you're potentially, for example, a customer, if you want to buy something from their website and so on, then they might be interested in sort of removing this filter. And that was not possible before, because there was only a way to sort of whitelist countries, and now it's possible to whitelist the Tor network itself. So that's a big part of it, yeah. And there are other providers doing this stuff. Of course, there will always be websites who will, if they see like a couple of abuse, like situations where they might be getting attacked or whatever by some Tor user, or there's a brute force attack or whatever, it's probably very easy for them to decide, yeah, we're just going to block everything. And then I think it's very important that if you are like a normal internet user and you're a Tor user as well, that you sort of tell them that that you have an interest in being on their website and you're still just a normal Tor user.
Yeah, that's a good direction. Awesome, yeah, thanks. Alice, do you have questions?
Alice, like always, have only a common question.
Yeah.
If you don't have other, I will ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we already have. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. The last questions. Alexander, what about one book can you recommend for our listeners?
A book?
A book.
Oh, wow. That's a good one.
It can be different kind of book. It can be science or fiction.
Science or fiction? Oh, I have so many books. Right now I'm reading.
You can choose only one.
Okay, it's going to be a technical one. I'm reading it right now, and I'm really impressed with it. It's called the Rust programming language. And it's about, obviously, the Mozilla programming language called Rust, which we're starting to use slowly more and more in the Tor project. And it's really well written, and it's a very, very good introduction to the programming language. So if you want to learn a new programming language, or you might want to learn your first programming language, then I think this book is pretty damn good.
Okay.
Awesome.
Describe yourself with 3 words.
Okay, that was unexpected. Stubborn, curious, very lovely.
Oh.
Nice.
If you can to have dinner with one famous person, die or alive, who it will be, and why?
Oh wow. I have no idea about that. I've never given that a thought. I think I've had a dinner with a large amount of the people I used to look really up to, because like a large amount of them is sort of in this community, like we just talked about with going to pets and so on. You suddenly meet all these people that has written a large amount of the things that you've been interested in for 10 years.
Cool.
So I remember like a funny story about this now that you mention it. I can't think of anyone right now, but I once was at a conference where I met Phil Zimmerman. I don't know if you guys know who he is. He's the guy who wrote PGP like many years ago, and I used to, when I was a teenager, read all these cool stories about how there was the export restrictions on cryptography in the US back then, and he managed to print the source code for PGP in a book in an OCR friendly font. And there was no export restrictions on books, so you could sell it as a book, and then people in other countries could take this book and scan it in, and then they suddenly had the source code for PGP. And I was suddenly at a dinner where I was sitting next to him, and I wanted him to sign my PGP key, and I usually don't care about PGP at all, but now I was sitting in front of him, and he looked at me and said, "Yeah, I'm not using PGP anymore." And I got pretty sad about that. So after that, I've like stopped being overly excited when I meet people I really want to meet.
Okay, thank you for coming. It was very interesting and exciting.
Thank you for having me.
I think
Yeah.
our listeners will be enjoy.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you very much for lots of technical content. Very
Yeah.
nice one.
Thank you guys for inviting me, and good luck with the conference.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Бай-бай.
Ох.
Интересный чувак.
Та Льоша всегда цікавих чуваків
Да.
приводить. Льоша говна не посоветует.
Да.
Но на самом деле фишка в том, что я же говорю, если, ну, на самом деле за рубежом вот многие вот эти ребята, которые делают, ну, реальный продукт, который работает, да, вот они как бы все достаточно, как бы, реально bright people, да.
Так, що у нас цікаво? Блін, нам треба нову новину говорити, тому що ми так давно не говорили
що
про
новини?
Там
новини.
новины просто, да, там надо их
На фоне
как-то-
главной новости
Веселее.
недели.
А що за головна новина на тижня?
А шо? Маск траву курил в прямом эфире.
Да?
Да.
Я не
Да.
видела. І що?
Пропустил.
А я так и не
Ничего.
понял, это настоящая новость или это фейк? Ну,
Не, реально, он где-то на
Реально?
ток-шоу. Да.
Где? В
Ну,
Голландии
разрешено.
где-то?
Я в
Долго ли
Калифорнии.
разрешено?
А в Калифорнии разрешено?
По-моему, в Калифорнии для медицинских целей, но в принципе
Ага.
более-менее уже
Ну
разрешено.
что, депрессию лечил? Можно мне полечить депрессию?
Не, подожди,
пожалуйста?
вроде же уже в Калифорнии разрешили рекреационную.
Ну да, я же говорю, ну, рекреационно, то есть у них, по-моему, не полностью, но в принципе это же то же самое. я считаю.
Не, ну рекреационная это уже,
Да, я шучу.
считай, полностью.
Считай полностью.
То есть это не медицина. Ну, а так, из новостей, что там? Очередная дырка в Windows 10,
Там ее же вроде уже это вот попачили.
Да, ну
а потом
там,
на патче на винде опять ее, так сказать, обнаружили.
Это вообще, это вот это... Я угадаю мелодию с 3 нот. На Монго там опять чергові атаки. Мені, короче, здається, що вот нет ничего прекраснее, чем Монго. Ну, есть флеш.
Да.
ну там постоянно. Да.
Вот. Там гид в очередной раз проверили на 490 тысяч уязвимых веб-сайтов. Ну, там всякие там пароли, ключи всякие лежат в гите в открытом виде. Ну, это тоже, короче, все как всегда. В общем, короче, ничего нового. А, Тесла бакбаунти объявила.
Да, да, там
Да.
было интересно. Ну, у нас вот
Вот.
новости, что пытаются разрешить в Штатах, короче, этим военным расстреливать дроны. Это нормальная новость из последней. Ну, типа, если они там пролетают там рядом с близко с такой военной базой или там еще где-то, короче, можно отстреливать их. Любые приватные дроны.
Ну, что там? Одни ресерчеры посчитали, так сказать, во что обходится какое количество воды и прочих ресурсов намайнить 1 биткоин, ну, кроме электричества. Это кому интересно, я там кидал ссылку.
Так, ну это трэш, да, давайте. Ну, не, ну новости какие-то есть, да, согласен. Но их надо как-то по-интересному преподносить.
Группировать.
Ну да, вот
я
это
же-
надо как-то формат как-то придумать новостей.
Да, надо. Ну, я якось посижу, подумаю, якщо в мене буде час найближчим часом. Ну,
Мгм.
коротше, з урахуванням, в якому темпі зараз вот это вот все проходит, я не знаю. Иногда сдохнуть хочется.
Сейчас, да, сейчас просто загрузки много, конференция близко.
2 конференции, Лёша, 2.
Да, то у меня с конференцией тоже, блин, короче, капец. То вроде уже все там нормально было, но у нас же Трамповая администрация, то есть мне должны были...
Нормально
сделать-
было с проведением или что?
Ну,
или
я
с приездом?
жду, не, с моим приездом, я жду, короче, визу, что-то должна была 1 октября, все окей, там процессинг, они подают на премиум процессинг, а в этом году отменили полностью премиум процессинг для всех, короче, там, блин, так что неизвестно, сколько это займет. Это просто, я уже тут сижу и... Ну, пока непонятно, то есть, да, опять. Но... там
Я
с Сергеем
зрозуміла.
общаемся,
Ну, я
помогаю.
сподіваюсь, ти приїдеш.
Заявочку я подал. Да не, ну,
Вот, хорошо, мальчики, рада була вас бачити. Дякую, що завітали. Дякую, Льоша, за хороші нам это саме контакти, гостей. Хорошо, все, пока-пока.
Да,
Пока.
пока.